Hi, this is Joe Shannon. I'm a lawyer, a husband, a father of 6 kids, and I also host a podcast called Opening Statement with Joe Shannon. Please consider listening to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and any other folks that host podcasts. Just Google Joe Shannon and podcast, and you'll find it. I hope you enjoyed the show. We are speaking today with Adam Banton of Disability Attorneys of Michigan. How are you today, Adam?
Doing great, Joe. How you doing?
Good. So just a little background for you folks out there. Adam is a partner at Disability Attorneys of Michigan. That's damichigan.com. And as you know, during our podcast, what we try and do is introduce folks to people that are in my world. And I've met Adam through a number of different events and done a lot of research on his firm. And I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. So tell me, you are right now in Michigan, right?
I am in Michigan, Metro Detroit.
That's great. And so why don't we start out with talking about your upbringing. Where did you grow up, Adam?
So I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, which is just off Lake Michigan, kind of the northwest portion of the Lower Peninsula.
Okay, and so tell me about your upbringing. Where'd you go to high school and your family and all that?
Yeah, so my parents are both from Traverse City. My mom, she grew up on a cherry farm, so her parents and 2 of her brothers farmed cherries up there. So I grew up spending my summers out on cherry orchards, helping to harvest the cherry crops. Spent a lot of time fishing with my dad, doing a lot of outdoor stuff. It's a great area up there for water activities and outdoor activities of all sorts. Then I went to high school at Traverse City West Senior High. Played football there. That was my main passion at that point beyond school was playing football.
What position did you play?
So I was offensive line, played a little bit of defensive line, but my sophomore year I played center, and then my junior and senior year I switched over to tackle.
Wow. So then did you have fun playing?
I loved football. It was it really taught me a lot, just teamwork, leadership. I became captain my senior year. I took leadership very seriously. I really had a great time. That was really kind of my network of friends, was pretty much made through football.
I grew up in a farming community myself, out in Yakima, Washington. And I worked in both the apple harvest and the cherry harvest. And I remember those 3 to 4 weeks we would work in the cherry harvest. I worked in a warehouse. I didn't work in the fields, but we had to do this thing called culling the cherries, which they go along on a conveyor belt, and then we had to pick out the bad ones. What type of work did you do with the cherries?
Oh, yeah. So, the equipment has evolved a little bit since I was out there harvesting, but essentially, I was out in the orchard. So you've got all these rows of cherry trees, and there'd be a tractor pulling a huge, probably, 70, 80 foot long conveyor belt along. And there were 2 tarps that would roll out from this conveyor belt, and you would have one person on each tarp. That was the toughest job on the farm, pulling the tarps out, wrapping it around the tree, and then another unit, the shaker, would come in, wrap it like a little fork kind of around the tree, shake the tree, all the cherries fall onto the tarp, and then the conveyor belt would roll it back in. And you got to hold those tarps while it rolls back in. And then, the conveyor belt, you'd run it along, pull sticks, leaves everything out. The cherries would go into a tank on the end of the conveyor belt. And then you'd have tractor drivers coming out, bringing fresh tanks, taking full tanks back to the pad where we'd load them up on trucks and take to the actual warehouse type places that would buy them from us. And I pretty much did everything other than driving the shaker. I kind of, made my way through and ended up on the high-low, which was the kind of the money job out there.
So how old were you when you started doing that?
Oh,
that cherry harvesting?
Young enough, my grandpa probably would have gotten in trouble, but
that's fine. We're not going to get him in trouble.
So since I can remember, I was going out to the cherry farm. It was kind of a family thing. So I have two older brothers. Both my parents would go out and help during harvest time. Because as you said, it's kind of that 3 to 4 week window, and you've got to strike when the cherries are ready. Otherwise, my grandparents, they relied on their entire income, on cherries for their entire income. So when it was time, and it was a total family event, So I don't remember not going out there, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And
was that in Traverse City too?
Yeah. So that was so Traverse City kind of has a cool geography. There's so off Lake Michigan, you've got Grand Traverse Bay, and there's a peninsula. There's a big peninsula called the Leelanau Peninsula that separates the bay from Lake Michigan. And then within Grand Traverse Bay, there's East Bay and West Bay, which is separated by a smaller peninsula called the Old Mission Peninsula. And my mom grew up out on the Old Mission Peninsula, and that's where my family's farms are. So, I just lost track. What was the question? Sorry, Joe.
Yeah, no. So you said you started out real early.
Yep.
And then I asked you where they were at. So you said they're on this peninsula. I'm
just
getting this picture of this place that is just idyllic.
It's beautiful. So the peninsula it's still technically Traverse City, but it's probably, they were, I don't know, 2/3 of the way out. It was probably about a 20-minute drive from downtown Traverse City. And downtown Traverse City is great because you've got the kind of the southern half of both of the bays are right down there. It's absolutely beautiful. I was born and raised there. I lived there till I went to college, and I didn't really realize how great it was until I started visiting home again from college, and I was just like, man, I really took this for granted. Now when I'm up there, you just driving by the bays, I can hardly keep my eyes on the road.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and the name of the airport is Cherry Capital Airport.
That's right. Traverse City, the cherry capital of the world, they claim. Which kind of funny, you're talking about Washington. Washington, of course, produces a ton of cherries as well. So Traverse City has a huge summer festival called the Cherry Festival. It's our big festival, fireworks, the Blue Angels fly, it's put on an air show. It's really a fun festival. And it's always towards the beginning of July, right around 4th of July. And, we called ourselves the cherry capital of the world, but it was amazing how infrequently we would actually have Traverse City cherries ready for the cherry festival. We would tend to ship them in from Washington so that there were cherries to sell to people around there. Because typically in that area, it was usually around mid-July before the harvest really started.
It's a later season, right?
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this picture of Traverse City, and I'm like, this looks like the place to grow up. Right? You're in between Lake Michigan, and then you go around, and if you go north, you go up to Mackinac, and then you take a right, you go down the other side, and that's Lake Huron, and then you get these beautiful bays. I mean, wow! I bet you got some good stories growing up there.
Oh yeah, it was great, and it was. I'm 36. I was born in 1984. So I grew up kind of late 80s, early 90s was that, true childhood for me. And I, thinking back on it, it was fantastic. You really didn't have a care in the world. It's not a small city really, and it's kind of spread out, but it really had that small town vibe. You tended to get to know the different families and everything around there. And it was just a really safe, fun place to grow up.
Well, that's great. And then, so you're there, you have you're basically you do a bunch of stuff with cherries. You're a driver, you're a tarp guy, you're everything but the shaker. What other jobs did you have growing up?
So other than the cherry farm, I mainly worked in a restaurant, Mongolian barbecue. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Oh yeah. So what did you do for them?
So Mongolian barbecue, I started working there shortly after I got my license, and I did a little bit of everything there too. Started out just doing prep work in the back, working on the dessert line, working on keeping the buffets full of food for people to come through and build their bowls. And then eventually, after maybe about a year and a half, I started grilling and doing some serving as well.
Wow. So you actually did the grilling at Mongolian Grill?
Yep.
And so tell me about that. It's not one of those places where you were actually cooking in front of the people?
Yeah. So it's a huge, I don't know what the diameter is on this grill, but, it's probably, 6 to 8 feet. And, you'd have, it depended on how busy it was, but you could have, up to four guys out there grilling, 600-degree grill. And it was a ton of fun, actually. I've always been pretty personable, and I like to interact with people. And that was where you could kind of, you could really interact freely. And for the most part, people who were there were into that. So, they're not sitting at their table having a conversation with one another. They're sitting there watching you cook their food. So I had a ton of fun, a lot of fun exchanges with people, try and come up with some different tricks and stuff to impress them. And it was a lot of fun. It was very hot, but it was a lot of fun.
So you were in the cherry business. You were basically a short order cook, man. That's going to get done in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then and that was during high school, right?
That was all high school. Yep. And then other than that, it was mainly, my parents were, they were serious about me focusing on academics, and keeping myself busy, staying out of trouble, and focusing on football.
So, when I think of a kid from Michigan, they want to go to either two places. They want to either go to University of Michigan or Michigan State.
Well, they all want to go to one place.
But they can. Okay, now you're one of those now. Now I have to tell you, my although it's not the same, I went to law school at Notre Dame, and so I get the rivalry, but I don't.
Oh yeah.
I'm trying to think. The football game between Michigan and Ohio State is huge, but that game between Michigan and Michigan State's got to be pretty big too, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a big one too. So it's kind of shifted. I'm a huge Michigan football fan. I have been my entire life. So I've got ornaments going back to when I was like 5 years old. My parents were already buying me U of M ornaments because I was so into them. I was watching all the football games. I was a fanatic at a young age. So when it finally came college time, initially I wanted to go play football in college because that had been such a huge part of my life during high school. But I wasn't big enough or good enough to go to a big school. So my options were either go play football at a smaller school, or, get the big experience, college life. So my now wife, we started dating when we were 17, we were in high school, and her whole family is, for the most part, they're all Wolverines. They're a lot of them went to Michigan. So she had applied there. She had gotten in. I hadn't even applied to Michigan because I wasn't really thinking about going that route. And then her and I started to get more serious, and that, of course, changed my my view on or my priorities, I guess, right?
Yeah.
best thing that ever happened to me though, is making that decision to get my application in there. That city and university really changed my life.
Tell me about that day when you got the letter from University of Michigan saying that you're in.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's emotional, actually. Thinking about it, I got home from, I think I'd just gotten home from school, and my dad, who is in construction, he happened to be home. So, with construction, jobs don't always go all day if you finish one, depending on where you're at, right? So he happened to be home. He was the only one home. And I walked in the door, and he had gotten the mail and said, "Hey, you got a letter from U of M here." And I knew it was, either good or bad news. So he handed it to me. I opened it up, read it 5 times to make sure I was reading it correctly, and told him I got in. And he was so proud. He had tears in his eyes. My family does not have a ton of education. So, my dad had to, he graduated mid-year his senior year. He and my mom were dating at that point. They both graduated mid-year their senior year because my dad's dad passed away. So he had to, man up, start working, help take care of the family. He had an older sister and a little brother. So they didn't get a lot of the opportunities to extend their education because of that. So he, education was always important. My brothers both went to smaller schools, kind of fizzled out, after about a year of giving it a shot. But he was so proud of me. He knew how much it meant to me. And yeah, I'll never forget that.
So
day.
tell me, how does a 5-year-old get so attached to a school with those crazy helmets? And did you go to a game when you were a kid or something?
No, the first game I went to was U of M, Wisconsin. It would have been, I think 2001. So that would have been my junior year of high school. I had my best friend at that point. He was a senior, and his dad had gotten some tickets. So we had a game downstate, a football game downstate, and I went with my buddy and his parents over to Ann Arbor. Stayed the night. That was Friday night, and then Saturday was the Michigan-Wisconsin game. I think it was a Michigan win by like 10-7. I would have to go back and look at that. But I feel like it was a close Michigan victory. That was my first time going to a game there, and that was actually my first experience in the city of Ann Arbor. And it just so happened to be on a Michigan football game, football game day, Saturday, which is the most magical place you can be on a Saturday for me anyway. I love the atmosphere. The U of M is a really cool kind of setup because the city essentially surrounds campus. The city and the campus are one and the same. So just walking through campus, grabbing conies at a restaurant there, seeing all the students out, all the alumni, all the fans, all the tailgating and everything. I mean, it was just like, holy cow, this place is amazing, and that was before I even really got serious about wanting to go there. But having that memory in my head, absolutely, that played a role in me wanting to go there. But yeah, I never really thought about the helmets. It was just always, they are what they are, and I've always liked them because I've been a fan.
That's great. So are you still a fan?
Yes, I am. I'm still very much a fan. If you ask my wife, she'll tell you I'm too much of a fan. It will, my mood for the week goes with whether Michigan wins or loses on Saturday for the most part. So after having kids, I've calmed down a little bit on it, but I still get a little bit crazy. My kids think I'm a little nuts when I'm watching the games, but they love it. We all have a good time.
That's great. So the kid from Traverse City makes the 4 hours plus trip, goes to the University of Michigan. And did your girlfriend get into?
Yeah. So, yep, she had actually gotten in before I even applied. I applied very late in the process my senior year because it just wasn't really on my
So the
radar.
pressure was on.
So the pressure was on, right? So then I thought, well, maybe I waited too long, and I don't have any connections to the university. And the pressure was definitely on.
Well, that's great. So you got in, your girlfriend got on in there too. And then, so you're there, and I'm taking that, that you enjoyed your 4 years at Michigan.
Loved it. Yeah, it was, it's tough to say the best 4 years of my life, but I feel like it was probably the most important 4 years
Why
of
is
my
that?
life. Well, Traverse City is a little closed off to the world. It's a little bit of a bubble. And I mean, quite frankly, Ann Arbor is a little bit of a bubble too in a lot of ways. But what I mean by Traverse City being a bit of a bubble is, I'm a white guy, right? Everyone in Traverse City looked like me. There's very little diversity up there. It's I forgot one job. The only other job I did was at the country club up there, and a lot of the members were, excited about me applying and whether or not I was going to get in. They kind of knew a little bit about my story. But it's just this melting pot of cultures and races and points of view. It opened my eyes to a lot. Those 4 years unquestionably, more than anything else, no disrespect to my parents, because they of course played a big part in who I am too, but those 4 years shaped who I am and what my ideals and everything are as an adult, more than any other period of time that I can think of.
And then, so you ended up graduating from there, and then I'm assuming you got married at some point.
Yeah, so we, my wife and I, now wife, we stayed together through. We knew it was either going to make or break us. Actually, when we got our housing information for Michigan, we were in, I think, one of two co-ed halls, and our rooms were about five doors down from one another our freshman year. So it was either going to be a really good situation or it was going to turn pretty ugly on us. So yeah, everything worked out. We stayed together through college. We ended up getting, I went straight to law school after college. And we ended up getting married after either our first or second year of, or my first or second year of law school. I think it was after my second year of law school.
That's great. And so then you got a family now?
Yep, have a family. I have two daughters. They are 6, and my younger daughter will be 4 on the 21st of this month.
Wow, that's pretty precious cargo.
It's great. Yep, the probably number 2, life-changing, set of years in my life has been since they were born, for sure.
Oh, that's great. So, so tell me about Wayne State in law school. You went just down the road from Ann Arbor to Detroit for law school, right?
Yeah. So, I was a little bit lost in college in terms of, I was discovering who I was, but not necessarily what I wanted to do with my life. So I was a psychology major, and I minored in crime and justice in undergrad. And I didn't have a ton of guidance in terms of what you can do with a psychology degree. And, kind of really, I didn't have much of a focused path, I guess you could say, in undergrad. So one of my great friends, to this day, he actually grew up in Traverse City. He was a year older than me, and he went to Michigan. It was his senior year, and he was deciding he was going to go to law school. And I was like, man, I've been thinking about that. He was a poli-sci major, and I was like, but I'm a psych major. And he's the one who opened my eyes to the fact that you can have any major you want in undergrad and still apply to law school. So I decided, this is something that I can remember teachers since elementary school telling me I should be a lawyer, because not that I'm argumentative, but I can always play devil's advocate. I can always find the other side, So I thought, maybe that's the route I'll go is law school. We didn't grow up with a ton of money, so that was always part of it. I just wanted a comfortable living. I wanted to have a career that I was proud of, and that would give me, the means to raise my family comfortably. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do it. So I started studying for the LSAT and took that, and then started applying to law schools.
A lot of folks that I talk to, because some of the folks that are listening, that they're maybe younger, they may be in high school, they may be in college, and I tell folks that I run into that are trying to figure this out. I say, when you go to college, sometimes, being on that straight career path where, you've got that great job right when you get out of college. I mean, that's all, fine and dandy, et cetera. But I think long term, you need, as you had those formative years on learn how to deal with people. But secondly, just learning how to speak, learning how to write, and learning an appreciation for reading and history and that's
Sure.
something that I think that's almost more important. Don't you think?
I totally agree. And I've had the same conversation with, other family members. I have some nieces and nephews who are getting older, and, just about what college to go to and what to major in and those sorts of things. And I totally agree. I guess it depends. If you have your eyes set on a particular career and you know exactly what classes you need to take and everything, then I get it, right? Some kids are lucky in that regard when they graduate high school, but I think that's without question the minority of people.
Adam, I think what this, here we are in 2020, right? And there's and you're an entrepreneur. You're building, helping to build this practice, and you guys are doing a great job. I promise we're going to get to that. I just this kind of stuff I think is the background on how people get there, and I think people are going to want to know who you are, and I think I'm getting to know you a little bit more listening to you. But I tell you, the thing that I think we're entering into now in our economy is that every single person that is alive, that wants to be, in an economy, has got to learn entrepreneurial skills. And part of that is you need to learn to speak to people properly. You need to learn to listen to them. Very important. Yes. And then also, but to be able to read and to understand issues and also to have a resilience to go through difficult times. And that's the thing that we, you develop a character of having to deal with ups and downs and then having a belief system. These are all very important things that, for people to be successful. And so what your major is in college, that's great. But the farther you get away from your college, your life's work is what defines you more than, where you went to college, et cetera. But I think, a lot of folks that they get really down on themselves. They don't do the best in high school, or they don't do the greatest in college, but their life's work is ahead of them.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the thing for me with college is I know a lot of people who are very, very close and dear to me and my family who didn't go to college, and they're super smart and they're successful. College is not for everybody. It really isn't. I think that there's this idea that it is. From age 18 to 22, I don't care if you're in college, working, whatever you're doing, you're growing up as a human being, because for most people, it's their first time kind of away from their family, doing their own thing, providing for themselves, right? So regardless of where you are, you're becoming that person that you're talking about. And I think it's about how seriously you take trying to, like you're saying, reading people. I think understanding other people and other people's point of view that was a huge thing for me in college. College kind of gave me a roadmap, more or less, even though it wasn't laid out for me. Looking back on it, I kind of look at it that way. It was a more it basically set things up for me to be forced to learn that kind of stuff. I'm not saying I wouldn't have learned it otherwise, But what I was talking about with the different cultures and races and everything, I was so ignorant to a lot of customs and things like that other cultures have. And I learned a lot of that in college, and I loved it. I mean, it opened my eyes to, beyond Michigan and beyond the country, but kind of globally, and looking at different issues because of that.
That's great. Yeah. So you came out of there with a little bit different, the big picture had a little bit, at least, had entered your viewing screen.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. I kind of went in almost with blinders on, just thinking, okay, I'm going to buckle down, do my work. I'm going to get good grades, and I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to have a degree from University of Michigan, and everyone's going to want to hire me, And it's like, once I got to my junior and senior year, I was like, oh, there are a lot of, smart people who are hardworking, put a lot of effort in, and it's not that easy. No one's rolling out the red carpet for me here.
Yeah. So then you ended up going to law school, and then did you work through law school, or what was your plan there?
So my first year of law school, I did not work. At that point, my wife didn't have an income either. She's a teacher. She was getting her master's at Michigan in teaching and education. And so for that first year I went to law school, we didn't really have much of an income coming in. So I had my student loans. I, got just enough extra basically to pay our rent and get groceries on. And she would do a little bit of tutoring and stuff on the side. And we just kind of made it work for that year. And then my second year of law school is when I started clerking. I clerked at a few firms between my second and third years, just different areas of law, trying to figure out exactly what it was I wanted to do and what it was I wanted to get into.
Okay. And then when you graduated from law school, tell us about getting that first job.
Yeah, so I graduated from law school at an interesting time, both I think nationally, as well as more specifically in the state of Michigan, and even more specifically in Southeast Michigan, because I graduated law school in 2009, which is right when the big three, the auto industry, was tanking, and Southeast Michigan relies heavily on the big three. It's amazing to me the trickle down effect when you have big companies like that, Ford and GM and Chrysler. It's not just the executives and the people working in the offices and the people working in the factories. It trickles down to from a legal standpoint specifically, any attorney who has anything to do with any of those companies, or by the way, any of their suppliers. I mean, there are tons of suppliers in this area that supply parts to these auto companies. So you have just a huge portion of our population that relies on the auto industry. And when the auto industry isn't doing well, a lot of people are looking for jobs, and that includes attorneys who they may have 5 years of experience, and they're applying for entry-level jobs. So I came out of law school at a time where most of these firms, they could have gone and hired somebody with experience and probably paid them a similar amount to what they paid me coming out of law school. That's how bad it was at that.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty daunting time, especially for a guy that's just he's newly married and thinking, hey, this is good. Everybody wants to hire me.
Newly married, 6-figure student loan debt. I mean, it was a stressful point in time. So when I was doing my job search, that first job search, I was open to anything, quite honestly. My goal at that point was I need to get my foot in the door somewhere. I need to get some real world, practical, legal experience. And if it ends up not being for me, that area, at least I'll have something I can put on my resume. I'll have some more knowledge to work with, and I'll start looking elsewhere once the economy starts taking off here again. So I applied to several places, had some interviews. Some went way better than others, and I ended up applying to Disability Attorneys Michigan. And I came in, had my first set of interviews, which, two separate interviews in different offices on the first day. And then I got called back for a second interview where we went out to dinner. And it was just more of a fit kind of thing, for company culture purposes. And I fell in love with these guys, Stu Johnson, who founded it, Samantha Ball, who's my partner now, was here at the time already. I think she had been working with Stu for about 4 years when I came in. And it was such a welcoming, warm atmosphere. People were so friendly, willing to teach, not getting frustrated with the newbie coming out of law school. So I loved the people. That was like easy one to check off the list. And I had a little bit of experience in school anyway, in law school, with Social Security disability as part of an elder law class that I took, because that was kind of really what I wanted to do, was estate planning type work, was my original intent. So I ended up getting this job, and I ended up loving it so much, and the amount we help people, and how grateful people are, plus the people that I'm working with. I've never even, I couldn't even tell you if I still have my initial resume. I don't keep a resume updated. Of course, now I don't. But yeah, I completely fell in love with it, and I've
How
never
long have you
looked
been
back.
there now?
I started there in December of 2009, so just over 10
Wow.
years.
And then so you've been working at the same place, and when you got there, how many folks were working there?
So we've had a little bit of a roller coaster. I was attorney number 7 when I started. We got up to, at one point a few years ago, up to 12 attorneys, and probably 48, 49 total staff. And then we have since kind of refined our practice and really dialed in what we're doing. And now we have 9 attorneys and about 36 staff. So 36 total. So it's roughly where we were when I started, but we are just a much more polished product.
Yeah, you guys focus heavily on Social Security disability, and right? Is that what you guys do?
Yep.
And then so I did some research on you guys, and when I looked up disability attorney in Michigan, I pulled up you guys, and you have hundreds of reviews. And then I looked for the competition, and I couldn't really find anybody even close to that.
Yeah, we care. We care about what people think of us, and I think it shows in our reviews. We are, of course, lucky in the sense, and it was, intentional, that by naming ourselves what we did, it's easy to find us online. And we want that because we want people to be able to find us easily. We want people to be able to see what other people, what their experiences have been with us, good or bad. I mean, I'm not telling you that everyone who we ever represent absolutely loves us. I mean, that's impossible. I don't think any business can say that. And I don't mind those reviews going up if somebody is unhappy for some reason, because for every one of those, we have 50 5-stars of people talking about how fantastic we were and what great care we
That's what I really like about this about you and Samantha, is the transparency. I mean, you can just tell in talking to both of you that you're going to give people the straight scoop. So the reason why I feel that is because, you guys have a high volume of people that contact you, and you're speaking to a lot of people. And if you're in the habit of telling people the truth, habit of telling people what exactly the length of time it's going to take, and then you have a specific area where you want to practice in, you get to be really, really good at it. And so that's a nice recipe for success, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. And I think, what you're talking about with transparency, I don't I'm not going to oversell, whether I'm overselling myself or our firm or, the process of going through Social Security to get benefits. I don't sugarcoat any of that stuff for anyone who calls me. And we'll get people who will call me or who will call us. And I think one thing that makes us a little bit different is we're willing to spend the time to tell somebody why they don't necessarily have a case that we could help them with, at least right at that point in time, and why. It's not just a sorry, can't help you click. It's explaining to them, whether it's educating them on the Social Security disability process, telling them why their case may be weak at this point in time and something that we might not have enough to work with. And what's some action items that they can take from that phone call and go work on, and we'll get people who will call us. I don't know. It could be months later. It could be years later and say, oh yeah, I remember talking to you and this was the issue at that point in time. And it was so great. You kind of explained things to me and I got my stuff in order and now I think I'm ready. And boom, all of a sudden they have a viable case that we can help them with, so we take the time to do that. We don't sugarcoat what the process is going to be like. You hear all these horror stories about Social Security and, for the most part, you hear the worst of the worst. So we try and kind of put things into perspective for people and give them a realistic idea of what to expect for better or worse. Because I'm not gonna overpromise and underdeliver. I'd rather do it the
right.
opposite.
No, I get it.
I'd rather underpromise, overdeliver.
So,
yeah.
Are there any? I know that you can't name names and all that stuff. But are there any meaningful cases that you remember in your years of practice? I know you're basically you've got a great resume so far, and you got many years ahead. But are up to this time, are there any memorable, cases that you can share with us?
Yeah, there are a couple that jump to mind. Because this is an area of law that's more of a volume type business. You tend to see a lot of the same types of cases, right? So you get your back type cases or head injury type cases or mental health cases, so a lot of those, are kind of similar. But there are a couple that have really stuck out to me, and it's usually the ones where, I had this one guy, this is probably, 6 or 7 years ago. I had this guy who he was just a hard working, he was construction. His body had just been used and abused over the years, he was just in really bad shape. And he was so proud that he waited and waited and waited to apply for any assistance. So by the time he applied, his financial situation, he had blown through all of his retirement income. He couldn't find a job. He was in his mid 50s and his body was beaten up and all he knew was manual labor. I don't even think he had a high school education. I think he had a limited education. So it wasn't easy for him just to go out there and find a job, regardless of the job. And his body couldn't handle it anyway. His body wouldn't have been able to. So by the time he gets to us, he's in such rough shape. He doesn't even know what he's going to do from month to month. And we ended up going through the process with him. We had a hearing, and we got done. It doesn't always happen, but we found out during the hearing that the judge was going to award benefits. And I went and talked to him, kind of did my debriefing after the hearing and explained to him what he was going to be getting, kind of the time frame for everything. And he was so emotional, and he said, just thank you so much. It's nice to finally know that I'm going to be able to put food on the table and I'm not going to have to worry about my landlord, knocking on my door again. And I left that hearing. I went out to my car. I'm a pretty, I've seen some stuff and I can pretty much handle my emotions pretty well. But I went out to my car and I was probably 5 minutes. I cried before I could hit the road, just because when you see that on a very personal level, it's hard to not be moved by it, and it's those kinds of stories that keep you going. Social Security gets such a bad name because people think everyone's just trying to, suckle off the teat of the system and get a free benefit from the government. And it's like, no, people work and pay into the system for a reason. You and I are paying out of our paychecks. We're paying into the insurance, the disability insurance benefits. That's what it's there for. And when you see those kinds of cases where you're literally keeping a roof over somebody's head and food on the table, I mean, that's all you need. One of those will keep going for years.
That gets you out of bed
when you
in the
actually
morning,
see
it?
it at that level. Yeah, 100%.
And the one thing that I think about too is you've got a young family. Do you want your kids to be proud of what you do? And that story is just a great story. I mean, I often think of some of these stories about these lawyers that stood up against really powerful interests and stood between their client and the powerful interest. And then I see these type of stories where you're basically, letting this fella tap into something he's been paying into his whole life that he doesn't think he's entitled to. And
yeah, and even if he's entitled to it, he doesn't want to admit that he needs it. It's that pride. It was one of those situations where it was like looking at my dad. The pride. It's like, okay, swallow it for once. I hope my dad listens to this. Swallow your pride for once, okay, and admit that you need help. It's okay. That's what it's there for. So yeah, that was really a meaningful
that's
case.
Great. Well, that's got me, very inspired today. And so Adam, I know that you guys do a lot of work in the community, which is great. You guys right there in, we call it Chicagoland where I'm at. I'm Detroit land, where you guys are at, right outside of Detroit. But damichigan.com, there's no downside to calling these folks. It's all basically contingent fees, and they'll even help you fill out an application. And it doesn't cost a dime to call you. Isn't that right, Adam?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we'll help right from getting the application filed through, U.S. District Court appeals. And yeah, it doesn't cost anything to call. It's all contingency. We only get an attorney fee if we win. And even then, sometimes we don't because, we at the initial level, especially, we have case. I just talked to a guy last week. We got his case awarded quickly enough that there ended up not actually being any back pay, which is what our fee would come out of. And I love those. I love those stories because even though we didn't get a fee, we did such a good service for this gentleman that I know he's going to tell everyone he knows
that's
about.
Great.
Us.
You want the cherry harvester. You want that tackle, the captain of his football team. You want that kid who lived his dream going to the University of Michigan, and the guy that basically is there all the time for his clients. You want Adam Banton on your team. And so give him a call, 800-701-5524. That's 800-701-5524. Disability Attorneys of Michigan. And they're there to help you. They'll be to help you from the beginning to the end. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I had a great time.
We'll talk soon. Thank you for listening to the opening statement with Joe Shannon. You can find us on the internet at shannonlawgroup.com or telephone our office at 312-578-9501. Have a terrific day.